Welcome, dear listeners. In tonight's story, we journey to the quiet edges of despair, where solace can be found in the most unlikely of places. Our tale begins not with a bang, but with a suffocating silence in a small room where a young man named Leo had forgotten the sound of his own laughter. Leo's world had faded to gray. He sat on the edge of his unmade bed, the pale morning light doing little to lift the gloom. Each day was an echo of the last, a monochrome existence where he felt more like a ghost than a person. He was profoundly, achingly alone, adrift in a sea of his own melancholy. That afternoon, on a walk to nowhere in particular, he saw it. A splash of faded color on a splintered telephone pole. It was a poster, brittle and curling at the edges, depicting a grinning crescent moon over a circus tent. The words were simple, stark. The Smiling Man's Midnight Carnival, one night only. There was no date, no time, yet Leo knew, with a certainty that both thrilled and chilled him, that one night only meant tonight. He felt a pull, a strange current in the stillness of his heart, drawing him towards the town's edge, towards a place that was always empty. And there it was, a carnival sprung fully formed from the damp earth. Its lights painted the swirling mist in hues of amber and crimson. It was a relic, a ghost of a bygone era, silent save for the distant wheezing melody of a calliope playing a tune he almost recognized. It felt both magical and deeply, fundamentally wrong. At the entrance, an empty ticket booth stood guard. A small hand-painted sign hung from a nail. It read, "Admission is free." But below, in smaller, spidery script, were the words, "But you must promise not to leave before the last show." A small price, he thought, for a night of distraction. He stepped through the gate. The air inside was thick with the scent of popcorn and spun sugar, but it was a phantom smell that carried the weight of memory. He bought a cone of cotton candy, and the first bite didn't taste of sugar, but of a forgotten summer afternoon when he was 7, lying in the grass and finding shapes in the clouds. He looked at the other attendees. They were like him. Their shoulders slumped with a familiar weight. Their eyes held a similar hollowness. But as they partook in the carnival's offerings, a strange, glassy joy crept over their faces. They drifted from ride to game, their movements slow, almost trance-like. Lonely souls gathered together. Drawn to a creaking Ferris wheel, Leo took a seat in a swaying car. As it climbed, lifting him above the melancholic tableau, the sadness that had been his constant companion for months began to recede. The city lights glittered below, and for the first time in forever, he felt a spark of genuine wonder. At the very apex, suspended between the stars and the strange carnival, a profound peace settled over him. Down below, the other lost souls looked like tiny, insignificant puppets. For a moment, he felt separate from them, better than them. He felt happy. And in that moment of pure, selfish bliss, a laugh escaped his lips. It was a rusty, unfamiliar sound. The moment it left him, the world shimmered just for a second, like heat haze on a summer road. He blinked, and for a terrifying instant, he couldn't remember his own mother's face. The memory returned a second later, but it felt thin, borrowed. Back on the ground, a new lightness filled his steps. The gray fog in his mind had lifted, but it had taken something with it. A small, crucial detail, like the name of his first pet, or the scent of his childhood home. He shook it off. This was what he wanted, wasn't it? to forget the pain? It was then he first heard it, beneath the wheezing calliope, a faint, melodic sound, like a child humming a nursery rhyme backwards. It was a sound that didn't enter through the ears, but seemed to sprout from the base of his skull, cold and invasive. No one else seemed to notice. He saw a ring-toss game, its prizes old, forgotten things, a dusty porcelain doll, a tarnished silver locket, a threadbare teddy bear. The bear, it tugged at a phantom memory, something lost in the fog. He felt an inexplicable urge to win it, to reclaim a piece of what he'd just lost. The carny behind the counter did not speak. His face was a canvas of deep shadows, but his smile was a fixed, painted slash of red. With a long, pale finger, he gestured for Leo to play. The gesture was not welcoming. It was an order, ancient and absolute. Leo's hand trembled as he picked up the rings. He tossed a ring. It spun through the air with impossible grace and landed perfectly over the neck of a bottle. The carny handed him the bear. Holding it, a memory flooded him. Not his own, but someone's. A birthday party, cake, the feeling of a loving hug. The joy was so pure that a second, louder laugh burst from him. The world went fuzzy at the edges. The backward humming grew louder in his skull, and the name of his childhood best friend turned to smoke in his mind. 2 laughs. The thought surfaced with sudden, stark terror. He felt lighter, but it was the lightness of being hollowed out, a vessel being emptied to make room for something else. He looked around and saw it clearly now. The other patrons, their faces fixed in rictus grins, were no longer wandering. They were taking their places. One was operating the merry-go-round with jerky movements, another frozen behind a popcorn machine, scooping endlessly. They were becoming part of the show. And then he saw him, standing by the silent calliope, perfectly still, the smiling man. He wasn't a clown in the funny sense. He was a thing wearing smeared makeup. His painted smile was too wide, stretching impossibly. His eyes were not human. They were ancient, knowing, and they were fixed directly on Leo. Panic, cold and absolute, seized him. He had to leave. He turned and ran for the gate, but the midway seemed to stretch, the path looping back on itself like a serpent eating its own tail. The laughter of the other patrons, now empty and mechanical, followed him. The gate was always in sight, but never any closer. He dodged past a merry-go-round, and it suddenly spun with violent speed. The painted horses' heads seemed to turn as he passed, their carved wooden eyes tracking his terror, their fixed grins mirroring that of the owner. The calliope music swelled, twisting the cheerful tune into a manic, predatory shriek. Every path he took, every turn he made, led him to the same destination, the gaping maw of a funhouse. Above its entrance, a leering clown face, a caricature of the smiling man, promised a hall of reflections. The backward humming was deafening here. It was a lure, a trap. His feet carried him forward against his will. Inside, the air was cold and still. The mirrors did not show his true reflection. One showed him happier, his eyes bright but empty. Another showed him successful, handsome, and utterly without a soul. They whispered to him, using his own voice, coaxing him with promises of release from all his pain. Then, in the main mirror before him, his own reflection began to change. The tired lines of his face smoothed out. A smile, wide and unnatural, stretched across his lips. Behind his shoulder, the face of the smiling man materialized, its knowing eyes boring into him from the silvered glass. It was offering him a bargain. "Just one more," the reflection whispered, its voice a perfect mimicry of his own. "One more laugh, and it all goes away. No more sadness, no more loneliness, just joy, forever." He felt a final perfect memory being offered to him, the feeling of unconditional love. It was intoxicating. It was almost enough. Almost. But in that last kernel of his true self, Leo knew that a life without pain was also a life without meaning. With a guttural scream of defiance, he clenched the dusty teddy bear and swung it with all his might, shattering the mirror. The sound was like a thunderclap, and the illusion broke with it. He ran. The funhouse contorted around him, the backward humming becoming a shriek of rage. He burst out onto the midway and didn't look back. The lights of the carnival flickered and died. The calliope music wound down into a final discordant groan. He sprinted through the gate, not stopping until he collapsed in the empty, dew-soaked field. As the sun rose higher, he walked home on trembling legs. The familiar suburban streets seemed alien, hyper-real after the nightmare. He kept glancing over his shoulder, but the field remained stubbornly empty. Was it real, or just a cruel trick of a lonely mind? He felt hollow, but he felt free. Later, needing something normal, he sat in a diner, his hands shaking as he reached for his wallet. The memory was already fading into a fever dream. He pulled out a few bills to pay for his coffee, and his fingers brushed against a piece of thick, unfamiliar cardstock. He pulled it out. He turned it over. On the back, in the same spidery script from the carnival sign, was a single chilling sentence. It read, "For the boy who lost his bear." The coffee cup slipped from his other hand, shattering on the floor. It was not a souvenir. It was a receipt, a claim check, and the item that had been claimed was him. Thank you for watching our latest tale from Beyond the Veil. If you have enjoyed our spooky story, feel free to drop a comment, like the video, and subscribe to the channel if you dare. And if you want to hear our next tale of terror from the pages of this old volume, click the story on the screen now. Until next time.